So hi everyone, I'm Andrew Craig, and unfortunately we lost the audio to the first part of this video. So as you can see here, we've turned the animal onto his back. We've tied off one fore and one hind leg off to two adjacent trees so that if one person was working on this by themselves, it'd be a lot easier to start the field dressing process as he's already in position. Okay, so now we're about to start. So where are we going to start here, Dad?
On this particular buck, because we're not going to make a head mount out of it, so we don't need to cape him out. So what I'd be doing is opening up his throat so that we can get him right from the trachea all the way out. So I would start by putting my knife through here, because I'm not going to damage any internal stomach organs or anything like that. So it's just the trachea and some meat, so we just cut right through, and then you can start cutting right down through the breastbone. When you get down to the sternum here, that's where you'll want to, get your hand right under the blade, and push the stomach and intestines out of the way, and then you can just zip right around the
Scrotum.
the junk. Yeah, and then around to the anus there. So
Which you've already prepped
I've prepped
by pulling or cutting around, pulling out, and tying off.
And I just use a zip tie.
Okay, so we can see here you've cut around the flesh there, found the actual anus, and tied it off.
Yep.
Okay.
To make things a little easier here, we've tilted the head back just as if you were going to give it artificial respiration. A little too late for this animal, but makes it a little easier to get things going.
Pretty much gotten to the breastbone here now.
You'll notice that we've switched knives here. It's always important to make sure you have a sharp knife. So once you've dressed and skinned your other game animals like moose, it's always important to sharpen your knife again.
What is it we're being careful to avoid doing?
Yeah, down in this spot here, it's really just sort of the urethra from the penis there that you don't want to cut, because it comes back around the outside of the pelvic bone. So when we start skinning them out or opening them up a little bit more, we'll just hold that all out of the way and trim around it.
Okay, so I've opened them up all the way from top to bottom now.
Okay, now it's time to go to the membrane that is going to expose the rest of the insides. Now that we've gone down one side of the penis, we want to come down around the other side so that we can pull that right back out of the way, so it's not going to be in the way when we continue or finish eviscerating the animal.
Nice. Yes, I'm coming right in underneath here.
Yep.
Where's the bladder and all that stuff then tying?
It's still inside his body there. All we're doing here is just getting the weenie sort of back out of the way, so that
Tissue that holds it up underneath.
Exactly, so that when we use the saw to open up the pelvic bone, all this will already be out of the way. So that you continue cutting down to the cut around the anus.
We're talking about through here.
Yeah, that's the urethra that you don't want to sever at this point.
Because it disappears back in through the...
Goes back in sort of exactly where the anus...
How much more trimming do I really need to do here then?
You want to take this cut here right down and trim that right down to where the cut around the anus is, so that's all one piece. correct, yeah. And you can, okay, so that we can leave, yeah, you can trim that a little bit there.
Alright, so before we start to open things up here, I'm gonna trim some of the hide back because I'm planning on keeping this hide and have it tanned, I think. So just getting it out of the way will give me a little more working room.
That's right. A little less hair we'll get in the chest cavity, because the less hair we have, cleaner meat.
Okay, so as I'm cutting back the hide here, it's easy to get confused by the fact that there's actually a very thin layer of muscle attached to the hide before it attached then to the tissue that actually holds the muscle of the animal. So you do cut through this, and you can see it's just a very thin layer of muscle, and this is actually what allows their hide to ripple and twitch when you see them in the wild still breathing. So that's all we're doing here. We are cutting through that because that's not something we're going to eat. So you can see I've almost exposed back now the right amount that I need here to start opening this guy up. And you can see how we cut through this thin layer of muscle here, and now it peels back, and you see a bit of muscle here, but then there's still more fat and tissue here. You might want to get a little closer.
Okay, so now that we've opened up enough area here that we can see what we're dealing with, we'll start back up here at the trachea, just the backside of the tongue, the lower jaw, and stick the knife down there without cutting into the trachea. We'll just run alongside it, and until we get up to the breastbone, and where we'll then
Getting through some meat, but just back to the breastbone.
now we're just cutting through the meat to the actual breastbone. And this will give us our line that we're going to use our saw to open up the rest of the chest cavity to give us maximum room to work with. Again, we only do this down until we get to the sternum, in which case then we'll turn the knife around and do the delicate procedure of opening up the abdominal cavity back to the pelvic bone.
Okay. Alright, so I've cut this guy back now. You can see all the meat. And now I'm actually finger on the bottom of the sternum here. And this is where this pocket opens up. And inside that is the actual
Abdominal cavity,
which has a tissue holding it all intact. But there's actually a space between this fat and structure and muscular structure here and that. And that's what we're going to make sure we do not let the knife touch by, when I come back through here, making sure that I've got space so that I'm not. This is where it's easy to cut yourself as well. So it's important to make sure that that knife is not cutting into the abdominal cavity, simply separating the tissue on top of it. Is what you're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, so you got sort of that's the membrane there that's going to really open things up, so you have to be really careful and gentle when you cut through that.
This is why I'm actually tempted to get my knife back out now.
Yeah.
Because I've got that. This is actually worth commenting on. For me, it's a moot point, but I can. This is what I did with the moose.
Yeah.
I can roll. Are you still taping?
Hmm.
So I'm switching back to my knife now because I'll be cutting further back here where my edge is still good. What I've discovered though is having that gut hook actually gives you a nice gentle edge to run across, and I found this effective previously, and that's the plan here is to be able to benefit from that in this case.
Important to note here too that you can actually open that up with your finger if you apply enough pressure, but you want to be careful not to push your finger into the stomach wall either.
Am I cutting right back to?
Yep, you cut right until you can't go, until you hit the pelvic bone there. Okay, so far really nice and clean. Okay, so we're going to gently remove the entrails. Careful not to, we just want to get them out of the way so that we can use the saw to open up the diaphragm to get all the entrails all out all at once. So. That's good. Okay, we've got enough space here now. We can use a saw without cutting into anything else.
Okay, so my father has a combination saw, wood teeth on one side, bone on the other. Not exactly hygienic, but make sure you're using the finer bone saw. And now we're going to crack the sternum open, I guess. So it's very important to be careful doing this, but we've made some space.
Okay, now we're ready to spread them open a little bit so we can expose the diaphragm and then cut that along the rib cage.
Okay, so actually come over here. So you can see right here, this is the diaphragm we're talking about, and we're actually going to trim it back because it's a wall between the abdominal cavity and the chest. So we're actually going to separate it right back along the rib cage here. And once that's done, it's a matter of just pulling everything out. We're going to start on this side, the high side, and we're going to trim right down to the spine by moving stuff out of the way. Then we're actually going to rotate the animal over and do the same on the other side.
Before rolling them over, we're going to just cut some more up around the trachea there so we can remove part of the trachea along with the...
You can see all the meat then that's in the neck here underneath as well. That's what we're trying not to cut.
That's right. Okay, by pulling on the trachea there and just gently cutting away anything that might be in the way, most of the entrails should all come out here. You do have to be careful working with your knife at this point though, because of the amount of blood that's still in the chest cavity makes it difficult to see where you're cutting. Okay, so here we've rolled the deer over on its other side to more easily access the expose the diaphragm for cutting. Okay, at this point here now we've rolled the deer back over onto the its original side there after getting all the entrails out. And now we're ready to cut the pelvic bone with a saw to get the rest of the intestines out. And again, you want to be very careful doing this, that you don't cut the intestines, but the the cavity is actually, when the bone separates, it'll actually open things right up and be able to pull that right out.
So,
Okay.
you just want to explain this?
Yeah, so now to just finish off the cutting through the pelvic bone, you want to be able to make sure that you have the rest of the large intestine and the urethra from the penis loose enough that you're not going to cut into them. So as you can see, Andy's pushing down there enough, and
Now I found the opening where the bone stops, so I know how far to go.
and again, this is where you want to be really careful. There we go. There, now you can spread it like that and use your knife to gently remove the rest of the colon.
Okay, so I've given the knife to my dad here because he is just far more experienced at this. So we can kind of get a feel for how he does it. Oh look, makes it look so easy.
Done.
Well, there you have it. Someone who's been doing it for a lot longer than me. And what's left?
Nothing but fat and get her hung up, and
Get her skinned out.
it's just fat.
So there you go. Learning for me and maybe for you. If nothing else, it's good reference for me. Thanks, Dad.
No problem.